So welcome back to Ask Steve Judd. I'm Sue Brain, and today Steve and I are going to be having a conversation about Chiron, because it is conjuncting the North Node in Aries in a couple of days' time, on the 19th of February. So, Steve, I know you feel it isn't utterly significant, and there's been much more significant stuff going on. But I think it's important, especially what's happening in the world, to really to have a chat about Chiron and just see how we can attune to it more. So what's your take on what's going on with the conjunction, but particularly what we can learn from it, to perhaps help us sit with things better that are going on in the world? There's so much crisis and change and trauma now.
Bearing in mind that Chiron has a really strange orbit, very elliptical. She spends 18 months in Virgo, Libra, spends 8 years in Pisces, in Aries. The node has a 18.5 to 19-year orbit. So it spends on average 19 months in each sign. So on average, the North Node and Chiron will conjunct every 13 years, 7 or 8 times in a century. So it's, in my opinion, it's not a conjunction. So it's not like Uranus and Pluto conjunction or something like that. It's not even as big as a Saturn conjunction, because it's twice as regular as any Saturn conjunctions. Nevertheless, it is in Aries. And whilst in my experience of working with clients, Chiron works very, very strongly in a birth chart. As in a natal birth chart, I couldn't conceive of doing a horoscope without using Chiron.
Yeah.
But by transit, it doesn't seem to work. Bearing in mind, it's only about 150 miles wide and 2.5 billion miles away. Although that doesn't matter, because you could say the same about, which is smaller than our moon. But Chiron conjunct Aries in the North Node, I suppose, especially at this time, it does give the cause for self-reflection and weighing up our own individual conscience and morality with some of the crazy things that are going on in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as a big deal, but it's certainly a signpost on the way to asking individuals to check their conscience, I guess.
Yes, and just check in with how they're feeling as well. It's a vulnerable spot. That's what I look at Chiron as. It's a sort of that vulnerability, and I think we're all feeling really vulnerable at the moment, if we own up to that.
I think the world's in an absolutely crazy state at the moment, and I've never really seen it this crazy. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. And before we started recording, we were both saying that there's a sense of not only anticipation, but trepidation around what's coming up in the next couple of months. And that is not just linked to yourself and me, Sue. I know many people are feeling this, and so do you. So it's obviously something brewing.
Definitely.
And it's kind of scary, but at the same time, it's also a little bit like, okay, so this is a crunch point now for humanity. Are we as a race deserving of continuing to evolve? Are we evolving, or are we regressing?
Yes.
It's easy for us to talk about this. We're old, you know.
I know.
But,
we're on we're at the end of the conveyor belt. We are.
Yeah.
The young people coming up. I mean, it must be, I can't imagine what it must be like to look out into the world and go, gosh, that's what I'm inheriting.
At the same time, you have optimism, hope.
Absolutely.
And they've got the potential to change things for the better, massively.
And I think
we are seeing that.
Don't they? Yeah, we are. Yeah.
We're really seeing that. The other week, I came across a fascinating stat in that when you look at most web views around the world, there's a in almost any subject you look at, there's a age, i.e. the younger people are looking at things online and the older people, except with astrology where it's the other way around. The majority of people who look at astrology are all over 40. Having said that, 20%, 25% of my students on my new course are under 30,
That's
which is
exciting.
great.
Yeah, that's
Really
exciting.
encouraging.
Mm.
So just getting a plug in for my new beginner's course in astrology course.
Very important. That's
Which
very exciting.
starts at the end of February.
Yeah. So I
yeah,
think
crazy.
that shows that people, young people are searching for something. They're searching for the answers where the traditional way of, let's say it was the church or wherever, is not working, and they're wanting something more.
We're on the point of the biggest time of concentrated change that humanity's ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's either going to go into something dystopian, or we're heading into some type of consciousness revolution. It'll probably be a mixture of both.
Yes.
But I do think that one of the signposts is here. Anyways, Chiron in Aries is a kind of forward, because in less than 2 years' time, both Saturn and Neptune would have moved into Aries, and Uranus will be moving into Gemini, and we're on the cusp of the biggest time of astrological change in history. This has never happened before, ever. And this is a one-time situation. So yes, the placebo of politics and money and religion is still dumbing down the majority of people, but more and more people are waking up and going, well, wait a minute, what's really important? What's really happening? What's the big picture here? And they're waking up to this idea of self-empowerment. And as I'm fond of saying to a lot of my clients, one planet, 8 billion different worlds. We're all responsible for our perception.
But I think the young people,
something I could
go on. I think the young people are looking at what's happening in the world, and they just don't want that. They want it different. And I think this is something that this whole interest in astrology is giving them the tools to actually know who they are, so that they can make a difference in their lives and in the collective.
Speaking of the collective, I've been really amazed at how many people recently have been restudying and reworking the works of Carl Jung, because he was the founder of modern psychology, and of course astrology and psychology are twins.
Yeah.
And Carl Jung himself was a great astrologer. And I was talking to someone about this just a couple of weeks ago, and they come up with, we were talking about their mother, as you do. And they come up with this wonderful statement that she said, it took me 40 years to realize I am not responsible for her happiness. And I suddenly thought, wow, I'm going to appropriate that. No one is responsible for anyone else's happiness but yourself. Only you are responsible for your own happiness.
But you have to get there and understand the subtle conditioning that we've all been exposed to through the family, through the parenting wanting something from the child that isn't just pure love, unconditional. It's conditional. And I think that's the journey that we're on. And that's what Chiron steps up and enables us to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the days of the nuclear,
I'm the lineage breaker here.
Yes. The nuclear family has been a very, very good construct for stability and security for the last few thousand years. But, tribe is becoming more and more important now. And, the idea is, it's amazing how as planets become discovered and emerge into the consciousness, so their archetypes develop into public perception. And we've explored this before with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But when Chiron was discovered in October 78, before that 1978, who have been practicing aromatherapy, homeopathy, astrology, and then you compare that to just 10 years later, and the holistic revolution took off at the time of Chiron's discovery. This idea of accepting the wounded one within and looking to not heal anybody else, but to empower other people to heal themselves.
Yes.
Not to be a healer, because that's fool's game, but to be a catalyst for others, to empower others.
And
That's a real innovation.
That is the essence of Chiron. It isn't just about the wounded healer. It's about processing that so you can become the mentor to other people, to empower them to do their work on themselves. And I think people forget that Chiron is about turning that into becoming a mentor, a teacher, rather than the healer. Would you agree with that?
I would, because when you look at the mythology of Chiron, when Chiron was conceived by his father, who then legged it, and then his mother abandoned him at birth, and then when he was found by the handmaidens of Apollo and taught by Apollo, Apollo taught him all about being a human, but neglected to teach him about being an animal. So he focused on the intuition and the various healing and warfare skills, but he neglected to teach Chiron about his instinct.
Wildness.
And instinct is becoming more and more of an important thing these days as we try and reclaim our relationship with our bodies, I think. Gut instinct, primal.
Yeah. I mean, what's happening
vital.
With a lot of clients that I'm talking with is this sense of yearning for connection. And I think that's what's so interesting about Chiron being half horse and half human. You know, this is sort of we're half material and we're half spirit. And when we haven't addressed the vulnerable, that wounded part in ourselves, which is basically about abandonment, isn't it? Chiron was abandoned. Yes. He wasn't wanted, and rejection. That's what we feel. This sort of sense of why has God forgotten me when you're in the shit? And I think it's this sense of learning what connection means. We think it's with another person, and that helps, but actually, it's with. Call it what you want. God, spirit, the dog with spots on it.
And the way that flows in and through you.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I've been putting Chiron in birth charts since 1987, 88, and I've been interpreting it since the early 90s. So I've got kind of 30 years of working with Chiron archetypes experience. And over the years, I've realized that certain catchphrases become more and more pertinent. Like, you're never going to be good enough, but you're always getting better. And 98% is good enough, because if you had 100%, you'd have wings. And best of all, not being asked to be successful. You're being asked to do your best.
Exactly.
And the only one who can tell you what your best is.
Yeah. It is that best. It is about
you are your own judge.
I have this thing, you're doing the best you can with who you are all the time. And you can, the more you understand yourself, the more that you walk into the Chiron energy, the more you can evolve that understanding of how can I evolve? How can I be more present? I think it's all about being present, isn't it? And this sense of connection.
A couple of days ago, I did a big video on the Mars-Pluto conjunction. I ended up ranting a bit. And I was saying, well, these days I consider myself more of a dark worker than I do a light worker, because, if you can't work with a dark, don't work with a light. And I found myself realizing that it's not about achieving your goals. It's about doing your best, being on the road rather than getting the end result.
Yes.
And it's also about coming to terms with your own weaknesses. knowing that you're never going to be perfect, accepting the shadow, accepting the weak, wounded one, accepting the dark, and giving them a nice little dungeon in the corner of your being where they can occasionally come out and play, where they feel accepted and loved, as opposed to being tried to be got rid of.
Yeah. Yes. Because it's about, I mean, I can only talk about my own healing experience and my own journey with Chiron, and it's been quite a profound journey for me. And all the stuff, all the disappointments, the you know, the hard times, the grief, the loss, the whatever I feel, it walks beside me, but it doesn't
Yes.
overwhelm me anymore. And I think that's when we start to work well with Chiron.
I have to tell you a funny story. About 20 years ago, oh, this is going to sound savage. About 20 years ago, I was at a client's house doing a bunch of readings for her and her friends, and then she led a guided meditation. Now I don't do guided meditations, right? My clients, my email tribe call me Mr. Grumpy, right? Because I don't. I'm fine with that. I don't do guided meditations, although other people do, and great for them. But I got roped into doing this guided meditation, and this client was guiding us through and telling us how we're going into Chiron's cave, and Chiron was going to come out and speak to us all. And afterwards, we all shared our experiences, and everyone else was going, "Oh, Chiron told me I've got to work with this part of my body, and I've got to do this to heal my relationship with my daughter." And then she came to me and said, "Steve, what did Chiron say to you?" I said, "Chiron, he just come out of his cave, looked at me, folded his arms to say, 'Yes, what do you want?'" And then he went back into his cave. And I thought, all right, okay, just get with it, you know? Okay, that works for me.
Well, it's
Just get on
really,
with it.
it's such an interesting thing you've said there, because, you know, I mean, people can get very sort of swept away. I don't want to be unkind, sort of a little bit holier than thou with their, you know, their sort of their healing.
Yeah.
And yes, and I think it's about, Karen is also about getting down and dirty with yourself,
Yes.
being grounded and real, and not being kind of little bit airy fairy with it all, because
Chiron is half
it
animal.
hurts. It's
Get into the mud.
painful. It's
Get into,
painful.
yes, it's got to hurt.
It has to, because otherwise it's not going to get well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hate to sound like Margaret Thatcher, but if it's not hurting, it's not working.
Now I've got Chiron with holding a hand. With one of those terrible hats on.
Oh my goodness, no.
Oh, hilarious.
This is getting
But it is
okay.
true, isn't it? It's this sort of sense that I do feel there's a lot of it, because we don't want the pain, and it's really scary to go into the pain. And I was talking to a client yesterday, and she's really stuck because she doesn't want to walk the fire. She just is so frightened of what that might feel like. And I did say to her at one point, look, are you ready to get down on your knees and beat the floor and shout for God, yell for God, help me? And that's what I think Chiron does when we really are willing to do that work, that deep, dark work. There is this sense we've got to surrender to something greater than us. And that's when we have, I feel that we have the breakthrough. Maybe not everyone has to get that intense with it, but my God, I did. I'm sure you have as well.
The only thing I might slightly disagree with you there is when you say something greater than us, to me, it's already naturally inside of us. It's just a question of awakening it. There's
Yes.
part of the journey here is well, the best book on Chiron is Melanie Reinhardt's Chiron and the wounded healer, or the healing journey. But in it, she relates a lot to the alchemical journey. And the idea of alchemizing oneself, changing oneself from lead into God, purifying, cleansing, but at the same time, always change, growing. And
Yes.
like I say, going to be always getting better. So the idea of alchemy and Chiron seems to, I don't know, I'm really with that at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, this sort of, yeah. Yes, it is that it is an alchemical. Well, my healing journey has been an alchemical process, and I'm deeply grateful to it. But it's taken me to places I really wish I would have preferred not to have visited. I'll be honest with you, but it's actually led me to this point now, sitting with you. If I hadn't done the journey, I wouldn't be doing. We wouldn't be doing. Well, I wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be here. So I think we have to be grateful.
A few weeks ago, a client sent me a link to a TED talk, and it was by a neurosurgeon. And I can't remember the name, but it was something like talking about the cingulate neurocortex. It's a part of the brain that only grows when you're doing things you don't want to do.
Wow. All right. We'll put a link below this video to that TED talk so
If I can find it, yeah, I'll send it to you straight after this talk.
Yeah,
If I can find it, I
yeah,
will. Yeah,
that's really great.
yeah, yeah.
That's really interesting. So people often say, does it, to grow, do I have to walk the fire? And I always say, yes, you do. But it depends on the depth of the heat of the fire, about where you are on your journey. I've walked several fires in my time, and each one's got hotter. And I'm always waiting for the next one. And I think if you feel that you are healed, Chiron just comes up and goes, "Oh, really?" with his handbag.
Yeah. To me, the analogy is also like, standing right on a cliff edge, or walking in the dark at 3 a.m. in the morning in a really dark, clouded forest on your own.
Yeah.
You gotta face your fears.
You've got to face your fears. Absolutely. It's that, yeah. Makes you, it kind of makes me go, ooh, I need to do a bit more reflection on this.
Yes, but the reward with Chiron, you can either be dichotomized, fragmented, and disintegrated, or if you're prepared to do the work, you can become integrated, assimilated, holistic, and more wholesome than you ever thought possible. Integration, such a good word.
Yeah. And the other thing is alive.
Yeah.
Being alive.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are kind of, who was it? Was Louis Theroux's dad, I can't remember his father's name, said that it was a huge, really scary thing. He said 98% of people live in a sense of quiet desperation. And I remember reading that going, I don't want that. I want to feel alive. I don't want to be feeling in a sense of quiet desperation. Thanks very much.
I just bought myself a crossbow.
Right.
Because Chiron is the wounded healer, half man, half horse. Chiron has a strong affiliation with Virgo, but he also has a strong affiliation with Sagittarius.
Yes, the centaur.
The centaur.
Yeah.
And one of the things about Sagittarius is it's the arrow. And the idea, I've always recommended a lot of people archery or something like that as a metaphor for sharpening their focus and attention and concentration. So now I've just bought myself a little crossbow. So for the first time, I've always wanted one. I've never had one. Now I've got one. So I'm going to go out into the woods and find a bit of dead wood and just see what happens,
Yes, I've actually taken up Tai Chi swords. So
okay,
the focus of the sharp end and taking responsibility
there's
for what.
strong similarity there.
Yes, very. Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Focus, concentration, and attention.
To the sharpness.
And if you bring a little bit of Saturn in here, because it's also about time and energy management, so you become more efficient.
Yes.
And when you think that at its closest point to the sun, Chiron overlaps the furthest most point of Saturn's orbit, but at its furthest most point from the sun, Chiron intersects with the nearest most point of Uranus's orbit. So it links the inner and the outer planets, links the visible with the invisible planets. So it could be seen as a metaphor for linking the conscious with the unconscious.
So it's like a conduit, an energetic conduit.
Yes, or
Yeah.
a portal.
A portal. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and a tunnel through to opening up other areas of the consciousness. And obviously, the future is in the consciousness for all of us. The future's in the imagination and the consciousness. So the idea of becoming more than we are, becoming more integrated, opening our brain, using more of our brain matter, because we only use about 23% of it at the moment.
Yeah.
This will automatically end warfare overnight.
Mm. And I think, you know, anyone, please go on, you know, take the courage, take the step. And if you're on your healing journey, gosh, Stephen, I salute you, because we know
How much it hurts.
it hurts and it's
I
difficult.
always tell them, look, this is going to hurt like hell, but it won't kill you.
It hurts.
You'll end up feeling invulnerable.
And it's worth it. It's worth it to feel alive and present and able to really contribute something of worth to those around you and to the collective. Steve, I'm conscious of time. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Is there something you'd like to say to just to bring it to a conclusion?
Remember, at all times, by the nature of being born on this planet at this time, you do have free will. The planets impel, they don't compel. You can just keep taking the Kool-Aid and ignore all of this, and just go and have your mortgage and everything that goes with the sort of placebos that we've been fed. But then why are you watching us? So,
Yeah, good point.
So yeah, find your shadow and give it a little place in your being, nurture it and love it.
Yeah.
Don't try to get rid of it. It's a vital part of your being.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of your grief. It gives you life.